Hi, welcome to the EUC channel. These are short tutorials, based on the prerequisites for Horizon Cloud on Azure. In this session we will look at Active Directory integration to the Horizon Cloud on Azure control plane. Log into your Horizon Universal Console tenant. You can see the wizard is prompting you for the AD integration at this point. Let's have a quick look at some of the prerequisites. We know that the Directory Access Requirements document calls for minimum levels needed to have a supported Microsoft Windows Active Directory domain in place with a functional level of Server 2008 R2, or Server 2012 R2, or Server 2016. Active Directory essentially supports one of the following configurations. The first configuration is to have Active Directory installed on a server, on-premise with a VPN, or using Express route into Azure. The second supported scenario is to have Active Directory installed within your Azure Cloud region. The third is to have Microsoft Azure Active Directory domain services enabled and using this as the LDAP connection. All cloud-connected pods in the same Horizon Cloud customer account must have line of sight to the same set of Active Directory domains at the time you deploy these pods. Look at these 4 key areas to ensure you have a successful AD integration. Firstly, we need a bind account with an auxiliary account, just in case the primary account is locked out or fails to authenticate. We also need a join account and once again an auxiliary account to act as the backup account. Thirdly, the domain security group for administrator access to the Horizon Universal Console access. And lastly, we need to ensure that we have an OU that contains the object and policies we want to use for our deployment. Horizon Cloud requires 2 types of service accounts from Active Directory. The first is a domain bind account that is used to perform lookups in your AD domain. And the second service account is used for joining computer accounts to the domain and performing sysprep operations. Do not use these service accounts in configurations other than in the Horizon Cloud tenant. If you reuse these service accounts in other configurations, unexpected results could occur. For example, unexpected notifications about the domain bind account might appear in the Horizon Universal Console. Also ensure that your domain bind and domain join accounts have the correct permissions as described in build documentation on all the OUs and objects that you specified within the context strings. Horizon Cloud cannot pre-populate or predict in advance which Active Directory groups you might want to use in the environment. You must configure these settings for your domain bind account and domain join account using the console. Log in to your VMware Horizon Universal Console. The wizard should be at the configuration stage for your Active Directory integration. Click Configure. Looking at what is required, this will be a good time to show the AD console and see how we identify the information required. We can see by looking at the Properties tab that the NetBIOS name and domain FQEN is provided in a case-sensitive format. Use this information and also check that your domain level is supported as pointed out earlier. Complete the fields using this information. Remember, only LDAP is supported, not LDAP-S. Next is the bind and join account details. We already covered the requirements for these, but let's have a quick look at the permissions and areas you will need to familiarize yourself with to ensure your access and permissions are valid for these accounts. Make sure the OU has no accidental deletion markers or tags enabled, and if this was enabled at some point you will need to ensure that all the accounts you need to use within the OU has the deny option unticked for deleting objects. Go ahead and create the 2 bind accounts and 2 join accounts following the documented setup guide or on-screen URL. This is a short version showing you how to get to the objects, and not the actual procedure for creating or assigning permissions. Remember, although you can set full control on the accounts instead of setting all the permissions separately, it is still recommended that you set the permissions separately. Once you are happy that your accounts have the correct permission, return to the Setup wizard and complete the details for both accounts. Now that you completed the account creation, populate the bind fields with the newly created details. Click the Advanced Properties. Specify the port if your setup uses a non-standard port. The domain controller IP will be used for the initial setup, but remember that the domain and join accounts will cycle through your AD controllers once completed, and may not be confined to just this one IP if the VNet has access to more AD controllers. The context can be used for limiting the deployment scope and objects, but make sure you use a context that include all the objects that you need for your deployment. We can now do a domain bind. Specify the DNS servers, default OU and join details as the final step. Don't forget to add an auxiliary account here. Finally, add the administration group responsible for access to the Horizon Universal Console. This group will be placed into the Super Admin group. You will have a chance to update this and change setting after the domain bind is successful. Once you click Save, you will be logged off and redirected to log in using your VMware account, and then use the admin account that is part of the admin group you have just specified. Make sure you have added your domain account. Well done, you have integrated and set up Active Directory successfully. Now continue to complete the setup by specifying roles and permissions for the new AD users. You currently have 4 roles to choose from and need to assign groups to each role you want to use. Follow the documentation to learn more about granular task and permissions overview for each role. Once you are happy with your assigned roles, move to the next task in the wizard. Thank you for watching.